When I married Ethan, I knew his mother, Linda, was opinionated. Everyone knew it. She had strong views on everything: how a kitchen should be organized, how often curtains should be washed, and apparently, how married couples should manage their finances. For the first year of our marriage, I tried my best to keep the peace. The apartment Ethan and I lived in was a beautiful two-bedroom place downtown. It wasn't luxurious, but it was comfortable and close to both our jobs. Every Sunday, Linda would stop by unannounced, carrying homemade casseroles and a fresh batch of criticism. "You should repaint this wall. You need better curtains. Ethan likes his coffee stronger than this." I smiled through most of it. What Linda didn't know was that the apartment had belonged to my grandfather. Years before he passed away, he transferred ownership to me. The property was legally mine, free and clear. I never made a big announcement about it. Ethan knew, of course, but we rarely discussed it with others. To me, it wasn't something worth bragging about. Then everything changed one Saturday morning. I was making breakfast when Linda arrived with a folder tucked under her arm. She sat at the dining table and slid a piece of paper toward me. "What's this?" I asked. "Your rent statement." I laughed. She didn't. "You're serious?" "Very." I looked at Ethan. He seemed uncomfortable. "Mom, maybe we should talk about this later." "No," Linda said firmly. "This is exactly the right time." I scanned the document. According to her calculations, I owed $1,200 a month in rent. Starting immediately. I honestly thought it was a joke. "Linda," I said carefully, "why would I pay rent?" She folded her arms. "Because Ethan contributes to this household. Therefore, you should contribute equally." "I already contribute." "Not enough." The absurdity of the conversation left me speechless. Then she delivered the real surprise. "I've spoken with Ethan, and he agrees." I turned toward my husband. His eyes dropped to the table. My stomach tightened. "You agree with this?" "Well," he began. "Mom thinks it's fair." "Fair? The apartment I owned? The place where they were sitting?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Linda leaned back confidently. "Starting next month, you'll transfer the rent to Ethan's account. That way expenses stay balanced." For several seconds, nobody spoke. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I simply asked one question. "Who exactly do you think owns this apartment?" Linda smiled. "The landlord, obviously." I nodded slowly. Interesting. Very interesting. Because neither of them seemed aware that the landlord was sitting directly across from them. I considered correcting them immediately. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the confidence in Linda's voice. Maybe it was Ethan's willingness to go along with her plan. Either way, I suddenly became curious. How far were they willing to take this? "Fine," I said. Linda looked pleased. "Wonderful. I knew you'd be reasonable." As they discussed their imaginary rental arrangement, I quietly finished my coffee. Neither noticed the smile forming on my face. Because hidden in my office drawer was a document they had clearly forgotten existed. The deed. And if they wanted to play landlord and tenant, I was more than willing to let the game continue. For now, over the next 2 weeks, Linda became increasingly involved in our finances. Far more involved than any mother-in-law should be. Every few days she would call Ethan to discuss what she referred to as household management. Eventually she created a spreadsheet. An actual spreadsheet. According to Linda, the apartment's rental value justified her proposed monthly payment. She even added late fees, maintenance estimates, and projected annual increases. It was impressive. Ridiculous, but impressive. I watched the situation unfold without saying much. Meanwhile, Ethan seemed convinced that his mother's logic made sense. One evening he sat beside me on the couch. "You know, Mom has a point." "Does she?" "Relationships should be equal." I closed my book. "Explain." "Well, if we're both benefiting from the apartment, shouldn't we both pay?" I stared at him. "Pay whom?" He hesitated. "That was the question, wasn't it? Just, contribute equally." "Ethan," I said carefully, "do you know who owns this apartment?" "Of course." "Then who?" His face changed. For a moment, realization flickered across his expression. Then it disappeared. "I know technically it's yours." Technically. The word annoyed me more than it should have. There's nothing technical about ownership. He sighed. "You know what I mean." Actually, I didn't. What I understood was that my husband had somehow convinced himself that ownership was less important than his mother's opinions. The following weekend Linda returned. This time she brought paperwork. Again. Here, she announced. What now? A rental agreement. I nearly dropped my coffee. You drafted a lease? Yes. She looked extremely proud of herself. The document listed Ethan as the recipient of monthly rent payments. Not me. Not the actual owner. Ethan. I skimmed several pages before setting it down. You spent time making this. Someone had to. That sentence told me everything. In Linda's mind, she wasn't helping. She was taking control. And she expected me to surrender it willingly. Instead, I signed nothing. I'm not comfortable with this, I said. Linda's smile vanished. Why not? Because it doesn't make sense. Of course it does. No, I replied. It really doesn't. The room became tense. For the first time, Linda seemed genuinely irritated. Sometimes marriage requires sacrifice. I nodded. Agreed. She mistook that for surrender. Unfortunately for her, I had reached my limit. That night I opened my office drawer. The deed sat exactly where I'd left it. Stamped. Recorded. Undeniable. I stared at the document for several moments. A strange sadness settled over me. This wasn't really about money anymore. It was about respect. Linda didn't respect boundaries. And Ethan wasn't protecting them. The next morning, I made a decision. No more hints. No more patience. The next time Linda brought up rent, I would show them exactly who the landlord was. And I would do it in a way neither of them would ever forget. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. Linda invited several family members to Sunday dinner. Her sister Karan. Her brother Mike. 2 cousins. Even Ethan's grandmother. The house was packed. Halfway through dessert, Linda cleared her throat dramatically. Whenever she did that, trouble usually followed. I have wonderful news, she announced. Everyone looked up. What news? Karan asked. Linda smiled. Ethan and Rachel have finally agreed to establish a proper financial arrangement. I nearly choked on my tea. Ethan looked horrified. Apparently even he hadn't known she planned to make an announcement. What arrangement? Mike asked. Linda sat straighter. Rachel will be paying rent. The table fell silent. Then came confusion. Rent? To who? Why? Linda raised a hand. As you know, I believe married couples should contribute equally. Several relatives exchanged puzzled glances. The explanation wasn't helping. Then Linda made her biggest mistake. She'll be paying Ethan monthly. A few eyebrows shot upward. I set my cup down. Slowly. Carefully. Linda, I said, are you sure you want to discuss this publicly? Absolutely. Good. Her smile widened. Mine did too. For entirely different reasons. I reached into my bag. Pulled out a folder. And placed it on the table. What's that? Karan asked. A property deed. The room became very quiet. Linda frowned. A deed? Yes. I opened the folder and turned the document toward everyone. Specifically, the deed for the apartment Ethan and I live in. Several relatives leaned closer. Mike adjusted his glasses. Karan read the page twice. Then her eyes widened. Oh. Linda's confidence faltered. What does that prove? I looked directly at her. It proves I own the apartment. Nobody spoke. I inherited it years ago, I continued. It's legally registered in my name. Karan suddenly laughed. A loud, uncontrollable laugh. Mike joined her. Then Ethan's grandmother started chuckling. Linda's face turned bright red. I wasn't finished. You spent weeks demanding rent. Silence. You created payment plans. More silence. You drafted a lease. Karan nearly fell out of her chair laughing. And all this time, I said calmly, you wanted me to pay rent for property that I already own. The realization finally hit everyone at once. The room exploded with reactions. Wait, seriously? She owns it. You wanted the owner to pay rent. Linda looked trapped. Because for the first time, she couldn't control the narrative. The facts were sitting on the table. Stamped by the county recorder's office. Impossible to argue with. And suddenly the family meeting wasn't going the way she'd planned. Not even close. After the laughter faded, the atmosphere shifted. What had begun as embarrassment quickly became something else. Questions. Lots of questions. Ethan knew? Mike asked. Everyone looked toward him. My husband swallowed. Yes. You knew she owned the apartment? Yes. Then why were you collecting rent? Ethan had no answer. Neither did Linda. For weeks they had acted as though ownership didn't matter. Now they were discovering that reality rarely cooperates with fantasy. Linda attempted one final defense. This isn't about ownership. I raised an eyebrow. No? No. It's about fairness. Fairness? Yes. I nodded slowly. Then let's discuss fairness. The room fell silent again. Fairness would be respecting property rights. Linda looked away. Fairness would be acknowledging facts. Still nothing. Fairness would be recognizing that I shouldn't be charged rent for my own apartment. Karan covered her mouth to hide another laugh. Even Ethan's grandmother shook her head. Linda, she said gently, I think you've gone a little too far. The comment landed harder than any criticism I could have delivered. Because it came from someone Linda respected. For once, she couldn't dismiss it. Dinner ended awkwardly. Guests left quickly. Within an hour, only Ethan and I remained. The silence between us felt heavy. Finally, he spoke. You embarrassed my mother. I stared at him. No. What? She embarrassed herself. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. And then, for the first time in weeks, he looked honestly ashamed. You're right. The admission surprised me. I should have stopped this. Yes. I knew it was ridiculous. Yes. I just didn't want to argue with her. That, unfortunately, made perfect sense. For years Ethan had avoided conflict with his mother. Everyone had. It was easier. Until it wasn't. I need boundaries, he said quietly. You do. We do. The conversation lasted hours. Longer than any serious discussion we'd ever had. For the first time, Ethan acknowledged how much influence Linda had over our marriage. And for the first time, he admitted it needed to change. The next morning he called her. I wasn't part of the conversation. I didn't need to be. Whatever was said, the result became clear immediately. The visit stopped. The spreadsheets disappeared. The rental discussions ended forever. Peace returned. At least temporarily. But one final conversation still remained. And it would determine whether our family moved forward, or fell apart completely. 3 weeks later, Linda called. Not Ethan. Me. That alone felt historic. Can we meet? She asked. Her voice sounded different. Smaller somehow. Okay, I said. We met at a quiet cafe on Saturday afternoon. For several moments neither of us spoke. Then Linda surprised me. I owe you an apology. I hadn't expected those words. Not from her. Not ever. She looked down at her coffee. I convinced myself I was helping. I listened. I thought I was protecting Ethan. From what? She sighed. Honestly? I don't know anymore. The answer was probably the most truthful thing she'd said in years. I crossed boundaries, she continued. Yes. I interfered. Yes. And I treated you unfairly. I appreciated that she didn't add excuses. No qualifications. No attempts to shift blame. Just accountability. For a long time we talked. About marriage. Family. Control. Expectations. Eventually Linda admitted something important. She struggled with the fact that Ethan was no longer a child. Many parents do. Most just handle it better. I wanted to stay involved, she said. But involvement isn't ownership. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. A small smile appeared. Fair point. When we finished, she reached into her purse. There's one more thing. She handed me a folded document. I opened it. It was the rental agreement. The infamous lease. Across the front, she had written one word in giant red letters. Void. I laughed. For the first time in months, so did she. The tension dissolved. Not completely. Trust takes time to rebuild. But it was a beginning. As we left the cafe, Linda stopped near the door. You know, she said, I really should have checked who owned the apartment. I smiled. That would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. She shook her head. I'll never live this down. Probably not. Family stories have a way of surviving forever. And this one was simply too good. After all, Not many people can say their mother-in-law demanded rent from them, only to discover she was trying to charge the landlord. And thanks to one little piece of paper called a deed, everyone finally learned a lesson about assumptions, boundaries, and the importance of knowing who actually owns the property before sending the bill.